What is up, boxing fans? Once again, live, FightHype Live, or Punched, or the Z-Cap, or we got a couple names floating out there for this right now, what we're doing. But we're live from the office again in Las Vegas, ready to talk all the news going on in boxing, ready to talk Spence Crawford a little bit more. Not really so much Spence Crawford. There's a fight to be made in the welterweight division for Errol Spence that can realistically be made to make everyone, for a little while at least, forget about Crawford Spence and be just as excited for another fight. And I want to get to that fight in just a minute, but I want a few more people to come into the chat before we get started, everyone. So let's see. Let's check the chat and just wait for some people to get in here. So it's a Sunday morning. Everyone's ready to watch football. I'm ready to watch my 49ers, but they don't go on until 1 o'clock my time, Pacific time. So got some time to kill. There we go. Fix the phone.
With night through is
and I thought, there was a fight. I was going for my run yesterday, and I was thinking even going live yesterday to talk about it, but I figured we'll save it for Sunday morning. But there is definitely a fight in the welterweight division that we could be really just as excited for Spence Crawford that can be made. It would just depend on the parties wanting to make it happen. So just want to let a few more people get in here, and then we'll get started. But how's everybody's Sunday going before we get started on the boxing? My Yankees are getting crushed in the ALCS. They're down 3-0, about to get swept from the Astros. My 49ers just got Christian McCaffrey. First start today against the Chiefs. We'll probably lose because most of the team's injured, but looking forward to Christian McCaffrey getting it in. And then Fury Chisora 3 was announced over the weekend. We talked to David Benavidez during the week. We talked to him about Caleb Plant and Canelo Alvarez, the two opponents everybody talks about at 168. We'll touch on that too. So today's topics are really going to be the best fight that could be made at welterweight with Crawford being tied up, Fury Chisora 3, and maybe touch on some of the most pointless trilogies that in recent boxing history. And then let's go over my interview with David Benavidez earlier this week, in which he said the Caleb Plant fight could happen in the first half of 2023. It doesn't have to marinate too long and wait a year. Dabrowski says, I want to see Boots versus Ortiz. I think that fight, look, I know we're in the era of over-marination, but that fight is undercooked. There's too much red meat. That fight's not even medium rare yet. That fight has to be for a world title, at least, I would think. Although Ryan and Tank are about to potentially not fight for a world title in a big fight. But one of those guys, Tank, has grabbed belts in a couple of weight classes, so neither Ortiz or Boots has had a chance to fight for a world championship yet. So, that's not the fight yet in the welterweight division, and that fight's not ready yet. But one day that will be a big fight, Ortiz versus Boots. Fights like Crawford and Spence have been a little over-marinated, but that fight is too raw, too much red meat. It's not even medium rare yet, Dabrowski. But thanks for being our first person in the chat, brother. Miguel Rivera, what's up, man? Looks like we got about 26 people in here. Looks like most people are out to church or ready to watch NFL Countdown on CBS or something. And we'll just take another minute here. Let the chat get a little more healthily full. But make no mistake, there is a fight in the welterweight division that is just as sexy, in my opinion, as Crawford Spence, and can make us just as excited. So we'll get right to that fight in a minute. I feel like a lot of you, who do you guys think I'm talking about before we get to the topic? The 43 of you already joining us here on FightHype. Go ahead in the chat. Let me know what fight you think I'm talking about. That'll give us just as much sparks in the welterweight division as Crawford and Spence. Shannon says, time for Spence to move on. Well, I got the perfect fight for him to move on to. I'll give you a hint. It might share a little similarity with one of the fights behind me. Hopkins-Taylor 2. Well, their first fight, but... Play. I see you play. Crisco713 Das Clark. Incorrect. That is not the answer, my friend. That might ultimately be the answer we get. That might be the fight we get. Errol Spence versus Stanionis, the WBA mandatory, undefeated from Lithuania. Stanionis, good fighter, explosive fighter, but not an Errol Spence's caliber. You know, Spence's jab would be too much for Stanionis. It's two guys that are very good on the front foot, very good in the phone booth range, but Errol can dictate when they're in and out of that range with his, excellent dominant southpaw jab, and I think he'd have his way with Stanionis and look very good in that fight. And it'd be an entertaining fight because Stanionis won't stop coming forward. But that feels like the most realistic fight, and then right behind that, possibly Thurman. But neither one of those fights is the one I'm talking about. Jay Daniel says no fight is as sexy. Yeah, I hear you. Maybe I think there'd be a decent amount of people that agree with that. But me personally, I feel like it is just as sexy. Let's see. Errol body snatches everyone. Why should Spence fight a young killer like Boots while Crawford fights a C-level fighter? Antonio Holmes says, well, just because someone else is doing something doesn't mean all of a sudden you don't have to hold yourself to that standard. Just because, I guess if your spouse cheated doesn't mean you go turn around and cheat. You just walk away, right? And you don't lower, you don't just do things that you normally wouldn't do or that aren't right because other people are doing them, right? So Spence still has a chance to prove himself in a great, excellent matchup at welterweight. He doesn't have to do what Crawford's doing and fight an overmatched opponent. He can keep doing his own thing and keep building his legacy in fights that really matter. But even if, look, and I'll forewarn us, even if Spence doesn't take this fight that I want him to take, and he fights Stanionis, that's still a much better fight than David Avenezian. So I'm not ready to make this video to bash Errol Spence if he doesn't get in the ring with the man I want to see him face, who I believe all of you will agree with me. I believe I'm speaking for all boxing fans, essentially, with the fight I want to see. But even if he winds up fighting a Stanionis, I'll always acknowledge that's a much tougher opponent and matchup than David Avenezian for Crawford. So, but this isn't so much about comparing his opposition that he's going to be up against to Crawford. This is about what's the best fight at welterweight boxing fans can hope to see. And let's get right to it now. About 100 people in here. You guys know what it is. The IBF mandatory, Jaron Boots Ennis against Errol Spence is easily the best fight that could be made in the welterweight division outside of Crawford and Spence fighting each other. Easily the best fight to be made in the welterweight division is Jaron Boots Ennis fighting either one of them if they're not going to face each other. With Spence, having to sit idle as the Crawford fight fell apart, there's good news for him if he still wants to prove himself to the fans in the greatest way possible in his next fight. There happens to be another undefeated switch hitter in the welterweight division with blistering hand speed, knockout puncher in both hands, and he's even bigger and 10 years younger than Terrence Bud Crawford, and that's Jaron Boots Ennis. And I already know all the arguments. Ennis hasn't beaten anybody. He's never won a world title. He's never fought in a world title fight. What does he bring to the table for a guy who spent 5 years of himself collecting 3 world titles in the welterweight division, who's on the precipice of undefeated? Why would he want to face a guy just as dangerous for a much less reward? He gets no world title out of it. And if he works Boots Ennis over, his haters could say, you beat a green guy who never beat anyone anyways. And there's a lot of business savvy reasons why that fight wouldn't happen right now. But guess what? Errol Spence, at one point, champ, you remember being that guy like Boots Ennis. You remember being the mandatory for the exact same world title, the IBF welterweight championship for Keith Thurman. And Keith Thurman was in the same spot you're in. He was unified, and he wanted the big, big money fights. He didn't want to fight the young, undefeated killer, Errol Spence. And you rightfully resented that about Keith, so much so that in part you don't even want to give him the satisfaction of a multi-million-dollar payday because you feel he didn't do what was right when you were the young, hungry fighter who deserved and earned that opportunity in the mandatory position. Thurman opted not to do it, and I don't think that's really why Spence says no, I wouldn't fight him. It's not that pissed him off, I'm sure, when he earned himself into the mandatory position and still couldn't get the world title shot. It was when they were both champions and Thurman still, for whatever reasons, injuries, whatever, never got in the ring for that unification. I'm sure that's what cemented it more than him not giving him the opportunity as a mandatory. But the point still stands. You've been there before, Errol, where, yeah, everyone can play you like, who's he fought? He's just undefeated. He's just a prospect. But everyone that knows boxing with their two eyeballs can see you are the next top welterweight. You are the next young gun that is going to be a threat to all the veteran champions. And we know that's the same case with Jaron Boots Ennis right now. That man behind me right there, Bernard Hopkins, before he left the middleweight division, and part of it was personal. Jermaine Taylor was managed by Lou DiBella, and there was a little personal axe to grind there that made Bernard fight Jermaine Taylor. But Bernard had a rematch with Roy Jones ready to go. He had big fights at light heavyweight like Antonio Tarver. He had big money ready to... He actually had a fight in that division against Winky Wright, a guy who couldn't punch, who was smaller than Bernard and was old too. A much less dangerous fight, but he took on the young, bigger, fast puncher in Jermaine Taylor. And Bernard said, before I go do this business with these veterans of light heavyweight, give me that young bull on pay-per-view. Give me that young bull on pay-per-view, because that's the kind of great fighter he was. And Errol Spence is the top dog at welterweight. And like I said before, if he goes on to fight Stan Jonas, and if he fights Thurman, which is a good fight, Thurman's a good fight. Those are still much tougher opposition than Terrence Crawford. So if you want to play it that way, you could just compare him to what Terrence Crawford's doing and saying, well, you can't criticize Errol Spence. He's fighting top welterweights. Terrence Crawford's fighting David Avanesian, a guy whose career highlight is retiring an old Shane Mosley. But forget comparing him to others. What's the best fight that could be made at welterweight? What's the number one fight at welterweight? Errol Spence could show the fans that he's the best in the world and what he's all about. It's Jaron Boots Ennis. And I understand the business people in boxing would say, Sean, you're being naive. You're being foolish here because that's just not the business that's lined up for. And plus, that fight, we don't like over marination, but that fight's not ready yet. That fight's undercooked. But here's the thing. I think, and now this is pure speculation. This is pure opinion. I think Jaron Boots Ennis would take a fight with Errol Spence for even a little bit less money than Keith Thurman would. And I don't know if with Keith Thurman's inactivity lately, he really brings that much more pay-per-view buys to the ring against Errol Spence. He probably brings some more, but I don't think that much more. And I think it'd be proportionate to Boots would take the pay cut in proportion to whatever the pay-per-view would be expected to generate versus Thurman. I think Boots would be on board and take what he deserves. He wouldn't price himself out of the fight. So I would love that fight. And I understand, my man Leonard Ellerby, who helped put on literally the biggest hundreds of millions of dollars fights in the game. He always mentions to the fans, it's bigger than the niche bubble that is hardcore boxing fans. And I understand that. But with that said, if you want those fans, if you want people who love boxing to say, you know what? It is on Crawford. We're putting the blame on Crawford, and we love what Spence is doing. And we're ready to move on from Crawford Spence. And if you're ready to move on from Crawford Spence, because I know you're talking about going to 154, if you're done with this latest fallout, then the real legacy fight, the real fight to prove yourself more than anything else would beat another undefeated switch hitter in Boots Ennis. And I guarantee you, I know that the hardcore boxing fans is just a bubble, but I do guarantee you every last one of them will be grateful for that fight, and they'll all buy it. Am I right or wrong, chat? Am I right or wrong? And as for the fight itself, what better time for Errol to get Boots in there to beat him? The guy's still green. He's never been taken to deep waters. He's never gone past 7. That's Errol's specialty. Get you to deep waters and drown you. He wears you down with attrition and work rate and body work. If he can get Boots to the second half of the fight, that young man's never been in waters like that with Errol Spence. So So from a competitive standpoint, this is the best time to make the fight for Errol. While he's still in his prime, and this kid hasn't gone 12 hard yet, that Errol will make him go. And then on the other side, Boots Ennis is maybe the most naturally gifted fighter in boxing. He could definitely pull off that fight despite the experience gap. I'd honestly be just as excited for Boots versus Spence than I would be Crawford versus Spence. But what do you guys think in the chat? Bud, let's see here. I would hate to see Errol ruin Boots' future. He's not ready. I hear you, but Jermaine Taylor had only fought William Joppy, who was washed, and Raul Marquez, who was small and washed, and they threw him in there with Bernard Hopkins, and I thought, if Dwayne Ford properly scores the 12th round, it's a draw, but Taylor pulled it off. He beat the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, Bernard Hopkins, at the time. These things have happened, man. It's being young and grabbing that torch, it can be done. It's just he needs the opportunity. And Errol, it would come down to Errol because Boots is not with the PBC officially. He's with Showtime, but he's not with the PBC. And I talked Friday about moving in good faith. And I think in good faith, I know Cameron Duncan manages Jaron, so things could get tricky there. But I think in good faith, I do think Jaron Ennis would return to the ring against any PBC opponents if he did pull off the win against Errol Spence. I don't think he's some guy I know he's lined up with Showtime. That's for sure. So I don't think Jaron Ennis, if he pulled off an upset against Errol Spence, would take the belts and run to DAZN and run to Bob Arum. I think he'd stick around and face other PBC opponents. So, I think he'd do the right thing in good faith. And again, I think business-wise, I think the young man would take the money. I think he'd take a fair offer. He might even take a little bit of a rough offer to get that opportunity against Spence. So you got the WBA mandatory Stan Jonas, probably the easiest fight to make. You got Thurman, which is a good fight. And then you got the best fight. And then you got a fight that essentially replaces Crawford. It's a switch hitter that is undefeated. And yeah, he doesn't have the resume Crawford has, but he has the youth and the welterweight size that Crawford doesn't have. That'd be a tremendous fight. I gotta at least, if we're gonna start making the Z-Man an influencer in boxing, we got to use the powers for good and try to, make a good influence. Try to summon something positive for the sport. And what could be more positive outside of Crawford Spence than Spence Boots at welterweight? So I'm putting my best foot forward, trying to get you guys the fights you want to see, because I know that's the fight I want to see, and I guarantee that's the fight you guys want to see if it's not Crawford. Spence versus Boots, Crawford versus Virgil, says Rigo in the chat. Jerry E., how does Boots outclass Virgil? Virgil's resume way better and had less fights. You can't always go off resume, Jerry. Everyone has a bad resume at some point until they don't anymore. Until they get to fight the guys with good resumes and they beat them. Floyd Mayweather versus Angel Manfredi, Mike Tyson against Michael Spinks, Mike did beat up Tony Tucker, Pinklin Thomas, but Michael Spinks had beaten Larry Holmes. Michael Spinks was a gold medalist. Michael Spinks was light heavyweight champion. Michael Spinks had a much better resume than Mike Tyson. That didn't stop him from going 91 seconds with Mike. Sometimes the younger, more talented, fresher, faster guy is gonna beat the guy with all those accomplishments. You're wrong. Spence is better at 154 pounds. Says Ray and everything. But Ray, I think Spence will be better at. I think Spence at these days, I think he will be more comfortable at 54. But he doesn't want to fight Jermell Charlo, and Jermell Charlo doesn't want to fight him. They are stable mates with Derek James, so that ruins the point of 154. I mean, you move up to a division to conquer it, right? And if you don't want to conquer the king of the division, that means stay at 147 and fight Boots Ennis. So. Let's see. Styles make fights, too. Resume doesn't mean everything. Absolutely. Right. Styles make fights. Bivol was a tough fight for Canelo at his size. His ability to move out of range, the jab. That was a tough style for Canelo. He brought to the ring some of the things Triple G brought that let Triple G win rounds in their first two fights, except he's bigger and younger and has better feet than Triple G. Doesn't have the power Triple G has. But Let me see here. He said he'd fight Charlo. Who said he'd fight Charlo? NoHo Apparel. I'm getting some texts from people. Shout out. It's funny. I got a text from someone in the business just now, and he says, "Let me guess. I just saw your live. You're wishing that Errol Spence fights someone super difficult and not Bud Crawford, right? While letting Bud be totally fine with fighting David Avanesyan." And I covered that early in the video. It's not okay. David Avanesyan is easy pickings for Terrence Crawford, and no matter who Errol Spence fights, it's going to be better than David Avanesyan. And Errol will deserve credit for that. But I'm not thinking about comparing him to a bad situation. I'm just thinking of what's best for the fans watching right now at home. What's best for the people who are going to spend, $50 to $100 on a pay-per-view? What do fans want to see? And correct me if I'm wrong, chat. Do you want to spend $100 on Errol Spence versus Stanionis from Cowboy Stadium? Do you want to spend $100 on Thurman and Spence maybe from Vegas? Or do you want Boots Ennis, undefeated, switch-hitting, knockout artist, the man some professional fighters compare to the Roy Jones in the welterweight division today, against Errol Spence? Philly, Texas, like Eagles, Cowboys in boxing. What fight do you guys want? You tell me in the chat. And again, if it bears repeating, for Errol Spence and people, Stanionis is going to be much better than David Avanesyan. But let's go for greatness. Let's shoot for the best fights possible. I know that's crazy, but let's do that. And if you fight Boots Ennis, a lot of boxing fans are going to just forget about the Crawford fight. I mean, they'll want to see Crawford fight the winner. But the court of public opinion will all be in Errol's favor. All be in Errol's favor. Even if he loses. Most people will say, man, but that was still awesome that he gave us the Ennis fight when he didn't have to. Or just out of nowhere. None of us even expected it. People who become so savvy to the business of the sport, they don't even ask for Spence versus Boots. Even though he's a mandatory just like Thurman and Stanionis is. There is literally no reason why one of those two should get the fight over Boots other than Boots is just super dangerous. Well, of course we want to see the super dangerous mandatory over the two guys who are still good but not as dangerous. What do you think we're doing here? Let Crawford fight Avanesyan on BLK Prime. Let's get a big one in Texas. So here we go. Khan Shonry saying Avanesyan is still a top 10 fighter and arguably the most accomplished welterweight in Europe. He's also KO'd his last 6 opponents. It may not be a 50-50 fight, but people are calling him a bum. Avanesyan is not a bum, and he was a guy who, some people like to take the information and run with it that Virgil Ortiz's team was hesitant to get in the ring with David Avanesyan. Now, I think Virgil would have handled David Avanesyan, but David is a come forward southpaw. He's not a bad tune-up. If the Spence fight actually still is going to happen, which I'm skeptical of at this point, those bridges could have been burned for all we know. Then Avanesyan is a good tune-up. He is a aggressive, good, strong welterweight who comes forward in the southpaw stance, and it'll give Crawford a decent tune-up before he would fight a southpaw like Errol. But it's a mismatch, and it's a matter of when, not if, Crawford scores his 11th straight knockout. He's knocked out everyone since Victor Postal. In that fight, I think he should work on his defense and take his time with Avanesyan and sharpen up all the tools and not just push for the exchanges and get him out of there once he's broke his sweat in rounds 3 and 4 and he's ready to start going. He should maybe get some rounds and take his time with David Avanesyan and shore everything up. But let's see in the chat. Thurman's resume is way better than Boots's. Well, Thurman's been fighting professionally longer than Boots Ennis. He's had more opportunities than Boots. But do you think at this juncture Thurman is a tougher fight than Boots Ennis? I ask that to you, the one and only. Rudy Tupapa says we need Spence versus Crawford, Canelo versus Benavidez, and Usyk versus Fury. Yeah, I mean, ideally, man. I think Fury will be in a big fight, and we'll get to Fury next. We're going to talk Fury Chisora. and where that ranks among some of the most meaningless trilogies in boxing history. But their first fight was a very good fight when they were young men. We'll get to that in a minute. Errol Spence versus Jaron Boots Ennis. All fire emojis from Davion JS. 1. When you guys are pressing 1, is that like confirmation? Like we agree? Is that what that means? Let me see. Oh no. Let me see. Oh, I see. You guys were answering the big dog's question in the chat. All right, let's see. 1 for Ennis. Got it. Okay, so you guys agree. Crawford ducked, period, Sean, says Mr. Shiraz 789. I can't, I don't mark it up as simple as that. I understand that situation. Look, the time for the fight to happen was realistically now. That's when the parties were realistically discussing a fight. That's when real numbers and money was being put on the table. And one guy, Terrence Crawford, stepped away from the table to face another much more overmatched opponent. And for some people, that's about it for them. That's as simple as it is there. But this isn't an odyssey we embarked on 6 months ago. This is an odyssey that began over 4 years ago. And so Crawford, had to hear how he had to wait his turn, how he was on the wrong side of the street, how Errol had other belts to collect first, and then he could wait his turn. Well, Terrence has now said, now you wait. And so I can't just 100% blame Terrence for saying, now you wait, when he was told to wait for a long time. It's petty. It's childish. I don't know if it's childish because I don't know the facts and you don't know the facts. We don't have the answer, Sway. Like, I don't, some people do, but I don't know the numbers that were offered with Spence versus what he's going to make with Avenesian. But essentially what I'm saying is I don't like what Crawford's done, but I can't just 100% give him the blame when he was put on ice, when he was told he had to wait for a while. Now the shoe's on the other foot, and it just needs to stop, period. And big fights need to happen. But, business has to line up. And the business did line up this time. And Crawford's comments were interesting to Coppinger and ESPN, where he said, Errol Spence chose to walk away from this fight. He said Errol Spence I was negotiating with a fighter who didn't want to fight as bad as me. So his final quote wasn't that the money was funny. It wasn't anything about, because that was what was originally holding the fight up, reported a week or two ago, right? Was that he wanted to see the books and he wanted to see the numbers. Well, his final comment was Spence doesn't want the fight. So that's him backing away, not backing away, but it's not him staying on what he originally said was holding up the fight, which was the numbers and he needed to take a look at the books. He kind of let that go and then tried to go back to the spin of putting it on Spence. And, Crawford's had to put up with some spin too. So it's just been an ugly situation. And I just want the sport and the business to learn from the situation and stop letting it play out like this, where fans are asking for a fight for nearly half a decade. And then it's like pulling teeth, getting it. And both parties they didn't do everything they could to build this up. They were so busy. Crawford doesn't like doing interviews. He's so busy saying, I don't need that fight. I'm already a Hall of Famer. And Errol Spence and the PBC are so busy saying he's on the wrong side of the street, and they're busy promoting Errol, that all this time went by without telling the public this is the fight, without getting the public fixated on these two guys. The public were fixated on these two because that was our interest, not because the promoters built it up. So, so these fights need to be, this can't keep happening. This can't be the norm going forward when two fighters are on separate platforms, and I hope we can all learn from this. And if this fight is never going to happen, I really do believe Jaron Ennis against either one of them is basically just as good a fight. And we get to move on to the next era of the division. It's a 25-year-old guy. So let me see. Oh yeah, side note, in other news, Deontay Wilder dropped a music video. And with as terrible as music is now, I thought he sounded just as good as everyone else on the radio. So, which is a compliment. Those people get paid professionally millions of dollars to sing, and he basically sounds just like them. His production and song. So, shout out to Deontay. That's a little bit of a diss to the music industry and a props to Deontay. So, and It's fire. That's funny. You're not alone. You're not alone, big boss man. You're not alone. A lot of people feel. I saw a few people on Twitter saying actually the beat's pretty good. Now I'm a hater. I'm just a hater. Like I think like the last music album I liked and I bought was Ghostface Killah in 2006, Fish Scale. And before that, Little Brother's album, the Minstrel Show in 2005. I might have bought a Royce the 5'9" album in 2009. But for over 10 years, I have hated music, and I feel like it's dead. I feel like music, we were really taking a left here. But shout out to Deontay Wilder's music video was how we got on this tangent. But rock and roll, everyone pretty much agrees rock and roll's dead. And it started to be known as dead when they brought the hair metal bands in and dudes were wearing lipstick like Twisted Sister. And they're like, okay, it's jumped the shark, right? Jumped the shark. Music jumped the shark over 10 years ago. But Deontay Wilder is here to save it. Like, he's here to save the heavyweight division. Shout out Deontay. Congrats on the song. Fish Scale was fire. Thank you for agreeing. New music is trash. I'm happy you agree. We want Bud versus Boots, says Willie Harris Sr. Yeah, but Boots versus Spence is incredible too. Incredible. And stylistically, it would be an incredible fight. Again, Stanionis is a good stylistic fight. And Thurman's a good fight. Stanionis is going to be a fun ass whooping to watch for Errol Spence. He's going to dictate off the jab, and he'll beat Stanionis at his own game when he feels like it. And other times he'll box him behind the jab, and it'll be fun to watch. Thurman will be a good fight. Thurman has still sets traps and has power. And there's personal animosity here. The press conferences will be good. But Boots is that fight, man. So, and we all know it. $1 Trillion Dreams. Thank you, brother, for the $5. Thank you, brother. $1 Trillion Dream says, it's not the damn fighters' faults. It's the men in suits. None of these fighters are scared of each other. PBC and Showtime dropped the ball this time. That is what some people... So, some people are going to say that $1 trillion. They're going to say what you're saying. And then other people are going to say Terrence Crawford dropped the ball. Terrence Crawford got away from Arum, and he had the undisputed mega fight at his feet, and he chose to walk away and do something else with a fringe platform. But then some people will say what you're saying. PBC essentially said, Crawford, you're with the wrong promoter. You get away from that promoter and we can make a fight happen. Well, he gets away from the promoter, he sues the promoter, and the fight still doesn't happen. The reality with this situation of regardless of the facts of whose faults it really is going to fall on, and we'll find out more of that as time goes on. It's nothing wrong with taking our time and finding out things as they go along. It comes with the territory of it everyone gets blamed. When a team loses, some people get more blame than others, but everyone gets blamed. And there's always someone who gets more blame than others, and it remains to be seen who that will be. Will it be PBC, Spence, or will it be Crawford? That's going to be up to the court of public opinion. That's up to you guys as we go along. You can argue it either way. There's an argument either way, but we'll see as we go along. But thank you, $1 Trillion, for that. Your sentiments are echoed by other fans. There's other fans who go against you and say it's Crawford's fault. But I don't really think it looks good on anybody, to be honest with you. We got told by the suits that you're talking about that, well, we don't discuss fights in public with the public because, that's not good for the negotiate. Okay, well, you didn't discuss it much in public and you still couldn't make a fight. So maybe you'd have been better off being transparent with us. And then Terrence Crawford, who done himself no favors with his public persona, doesn't like interviews. I get it. He just likes to fight. He's a no-nonsense guy. What's there to talk about? I get in there, I handle my business. And that's what I'm here to do. I get it, and I respect it largely, but it hasn't helped you. Now when those numbers matter, now when pay-per-view numbers matter and being a draw matters, now you're not going to be happy with the percentages they're throwing your way sometimes in a Spence fight. But part of that is because you didn't want to do the interviews and promote yourself and do Wild and Out, Nick Cannon, and stuff like that. So there's enough blame to go around right now because we didn't get the fight. But if Spence wants to, and when you make lots of millions of dollars beating people up, you tend to stop caring as much what people think. But if Spence wants to silence it all and show everyone who really is the serious guy trying to make the best fights possible and who isn't running from any smoke, give the opportunity to Jaron Boots Ennis that you felt you deserved against Keith Thurman when he didn't give you that opportunity when you were an IBF mandatory. Be the bigger man. But if you don't, you fight Stanionis, I'll definitely say that's a much better fight than Avanesian. So the one and only says boxing is a business more than it is a sport. If the money ain't right, nothing is right. Grizz IMR says, Sean, you can't go off eye test saying Boots is the guy when we haven't seen him against a top fighter yet. We all thought Elvis Rodriguez was the guy, and look what happened to him. He's graduated beyond where Elvis was at. Elvis got knocked off after 10 fights against real prospect opposition. He has fought Sergey Lipinets, who since went on and won a good fight. I'm trying to remember who, but Figueroa went on and retired Omar Figueroa. Lipinets is a former world champion. Elvis didn't beat no former world champions, and he destroyed Lipinets. Lipinets said that was the best fighter he's ever been in the ring with. And Elvis Rodriguez never showed the counterpunching or the defense and the upper body fluidity and slickness that Jaron Ennis showed. He can't switch hit like Jaron Ennis. And Jaron Ennis has a great jab out of the orthodox stance, out of the southpaw stance. It's a different punch selection. He's one of the rare fighters with heavy hands and the snap at the end of the punch with the speed and the power. He has both of that snap power that Mike Tyson had from speed, and he has the heavy-handed power like George Foreman. He is a rare talent, and him against Spence would be tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. Let's go Mets, RR1000. Can we ban him? We need a moderator. Can we ban RR1000 for his comment about Let's Go Mets? We don't do that here. 27 championships, okay? 27. The Yankees won the game of baseball. They just keep playing baseball because it makes money and people still show up to the games. The sport of baseball was won 20 years ago by the New York Yankees. No one's ever going to catch up. So, fuck the Mets. All right, Benavidez should move up to 175 to fight Beterbiev. Bivol, Canelo will not fight him, wasting his time. I said that over a year ago. I said that in early 2021, but here we are. And at this point, he might as well stick around 68 because it looks like he will get the plant fight. But I did say that well over a year ago for the reasons you said too. Damn. All right. So I think that does it for Spence and Boots. Unless, you guys in the chat got any other questions about that. That's my opinion on it. To sum it all up, best fight that could be made in the division since this fight didn't come off is Spence and Boots. Great style matchup. It essentially replaces Terrence Crawford. You get another undefeated switch-hitting guy who doesn't have the resume and experience of Crawford, but he has the youth Crawford doesn't have, and he has some of the size Crawford doesn't have at welterweight. Boots is going to be a middleweight one day. He's a mandatory just like the other two options are. The only difference is deep down we all know he's much more dangerous. But that would be being great. Stanionis and Thurman, those are good fights, but Boots is a great fight. And just because Crawford's taking a fight against an overmatched opponent doesn't mean you have to lower your standards. You could still be great in your next fight. And to me, beating Jaron Ennis would be great. You wouldn't hear green out of my mouth. You wouldn't hear unproven out of my mouth. I know what my eyes see with that kid's talent. Errol Spence beats him. Even if it's a David Reed Trinidad situation or Meldrick Taylor Chavez, that he ruins them and he doesn't go on to do anything after that. I know what he beat that night. That would be greatness from Errol Spence. So fingers crossed. I'm just trying to use my powers for good here and get the best fights possible made. Richie Quayo says Keith Thurman's a good fight. It is a good fight. I do agree. I do like that fight, but I love the Ennis fight. $1 Trillion Dreams. These are your words, not mine. $1 Trillion Dreams. Thank you for the $5 donation again, my friend. Thank you. Al Heyman is an emotional jerk and is mad at Bud, so he lowballed him and basically sandbagged negotiations. They had about 7 months to make this fight. Your words, not mine. But $1 Trillion Dreams, and thank you again for the chat donation. You could say the same thing about Crawford, can't you? Can't you say Crawford potentially is salty with Al Heyman because he felt he was frozen out for 3 or 4 years, and now when the time came to make the fight, he wanted to kick sand in his face. He wanted to do what he feels is a shoe on the other foot. You could make the argument the other way around, that, you know, now Crawford just doesn't want to do business with people he holds personal animosity from. And that would deserve criticism, because in life, it's supposed to be business, never personal. And that winds up always being easier said than done. But, you know, you could put that the other way too, $1 Trillion Dreams, that it's Terrence with the animosity for things in the past that he felt were transgressions against him, and that's why he didn't want to make the fight. It's not a good look for everyone involved. If Errol fought Boots, that would be huge. Absolutely. That would replace the fight. I think a lot of us would move on, right or wrong. Now Canelo is ducking David, says Sean, but David fights bum after bum as his weight. I don't like the opposition David's fighting. And if you watch my interview with David, I asked him, I said, what do you have to say to fans who say, why don't you move up to 75 as you continue to face guys who aren't in the top 5 at 68? You know, and he said that because here's where the money is, right? But I said that David should move up and fight Beterbiev. When he lost the titles on the scale in 2020 in the bubble, I said, forget it, because I believe for a moment there, the WBC made him the #1 guy for Beterbiev's belt. And I said, you know, instead of waiting around for these guys, Canelo's going to go up to 75 again, which he did, and he lost to Bivol. You might as well just go to 75 and make a fight with Beterbiev. But that wasn't feasible because Beterbiev was with Top Rank, and so the business BS got in the way of that happening. And so I don't want to see him fight David Lemieux and Jose Uzcategui. These fights are nearly wastes of time, but business can be complicated. And Plant was busy getting a huge payday against Canelo, and that was smart business to not put him in there with David and risk a big payday with. I don't like it as a fan, but it was smart business. And look, if Canelo never fights David Benavidez, by the way, I'm not a Canelo hater. There he is right there amongst some of the fighters in my wall. If he doesn't fight David, he's still a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's still one of the top 5 fighters to ever lace him up from Mexico. He's a great fighter. I love Canelo in the ring, but just like I'm saying with Spence fighting Jaron Ennis, if he doesn't fight Jaron Ennis and he fights Stan Jonas, it's still a good fight. If he fights Keith Thurman, it's still a good fight. But the best fight is David Benavidez for Canelo Alvarez at 168. Just like the best fight with Crawford off the table is Boots Ennis for Errol Spence at 147. If these guys don't take the fight I want to see, that most of you want to see, it doesn't mean they're not a great fighter or X, Y, and Z. It just means that's the fight more than any other ones we want to see. And that's all I'm getting through with kind of hounding Canelo about David is, look, champ, if you're going to stick around 168, you already grabbed all the belts. The best fight is Benavidez. Do you want to fight him or not? If you don't, you don't. You know, just tell me. So it's not personal. Just trying to get the best fights made. We have Rolando Romero in the chat. Hello, brother. Yesterday on the channel at work, I interviewed Steven Nelson, friend of the director. Spanish, but he talks in English. Greetings, FightHype. Greetings to you too, Rolando Romero. So, Ray and Everything says, I believe Sean is trying to set Spence up to lose at 147. I'm not trying to get him to lose. That's not, see, why do you think about making great fights that way? So because I want to see him face the toughest opponent possible, I want to see him lose. And what do you want to see? You don't want to see him against the toughest opponents possible? Whether it's Crawford, whether it's Canelo, whether it's Spence, whether it's any fighter. You don't want to see the best fight possible? I don't want to see Crawford Avanesian. I don't want to see Spence Daniel. You know, I want to see some mix of Boots, Bud, and Errol. And may the best man win. If Errol Spence can beat Boots Ennis, that would be great. I'd give him flowers just for taking the fight, win or lose, because he doesn't have to. I'd give him big props just for taking the challenge. But it's not to set up Spence to lose. It's to see the best fight possible. I do like Jaron Ennis. I do love watching him fight. I do have I do have a vested interest in wanting to see him get a big opportunity. You're right, but it's not to set Spence up. It's to give a guy an opportunity that I know is on that level. He just needs to give the opportunity. It's not to set Spence up. It's to salvage the division. It's to make the best fight possible that I actually would be excited for. That's all. But I think appreciate your comment though, brother. Thank you for letting me, Ray and everything. Appreciate you for jumping in the chat. So let's move on. I think that's about 45 minutes on the fight I hope happens. And let's move on to a fight that is happening. Tyson Fury taking on Derek Chisora. Derek Chisora against Tyson Fury. I beat him twice. Sparked him the second time. First time was a good fight. He's a good man, Derek Chisora. The boom, the dorsa, the weightlifting boom. Didn't want to fight the middleweight. Didn't want to fight. Tried to fight the weightlifter. Tried to fight the middleweight. So we do it a third time with Derek Chisora. Del boy, good man, fighting man. Was a man willing to take the money. And I'm going to beat him a third time. December 3rd, come see the Gypsy King. So Tyson Fury will take on Del Boy Chisora for a third time. And will join the pantheon of trilogies alongside Bernard Hopkins and Robert Allen and Winky Wright against Bronco McCart and Evander Holyfield against John Ruiz as the most meaningless trilogies in boxing history. And we want to thank Fury for that. We love Tyson Fury. Love to score another one for the big GK. But all jokes aside, their first fight in 2011 was pretty good. That was a really good fight. Second fight, Fury slowed the pace down a little bit and was more dominant, and he stopped him. First fight, Chisora hurt Fury in the second round, hit him with some overhand shots right on the button. First fight was really good. Fury won 9-3, 10-2, but Chisora was very competitive and hit him with a number of big shots. Second fight, Fury improved, stopped him in the 10th round. But and actually, and I'm gonna piss some of you. I'm gonna be a little blasphemous here, but on a lower level, their fights were a little Ali Frazier-esque in that Fury is the boxer on the outside, and Chisora. Look, Chisora's no Joe Frazier, but Chisora is a good heavyweight, and Chisora isn't one of these big 6'6", 6'7" heavyweights. He's more of like the old school heavyweight who can get low and move down and goes to the body. Chisora's a solid heavyweight, especially in today's era. But a little bit like Ali Frazier. Fury against the ropes at times on the outside, combinations on the outside, covering up on the ropes at times, and then Chisora nonstop coming in, trying to get low, trying to get underneath on the taller guy on the boxing outside. So that's like Fury's Frazier, to be blasphemous. Real quick, $1 Trillion Dream says, I want to see Boots fight Spence and beat him, then fight Bud and beat him because I'm sick of both of them, then move up to 154, and I imagine fight Charlo. So thanks for your comment. That you're hearing straight from the horse's mouth how some of the fans feel, guys. Like, it's how some people feel. Some people feel like, forget Spence and Crawford, I'm just ready to move on. That's how some people are treating it. I still want to see the fight. I still want to see the fight in 2023, but $1 Trillion Dreams, I know for a fact, isn't alone. But back to Fury and Chisora. Thank you again, brother. Back to Fury and Chisora 3. Yeah, a little bit of their Ali Frazier dynamic at a lower level, obviously. But for fight 3, no one asked for this. Fury tried to allegedly get Joshua in. We don't know how much of it was posturing. Joshua just fought 4 or 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago against Alexander Usyk. Nobody really turns around and fights that quickly, except Canelo did it in 2021. Yildirim, Saunders, Plant. So sans Canelo, in the last 10 years, nobody really turns around and fights in 3 or 4 months. So we don't know how much of that was posturing from Fury, trying to publicly negotiate a fight. He knew Joshua was never going to accept, having just fought so recently, and he just wanted to be a master of media and continue to paint the narrative that Joshua doesn't want to fight him. And then Usyk, same thing. Usyk was ready to have vacation, so he knows Usyk wasn't going to get in the ring with him in December. So Fury gets the guy he can get in there, his boy, I know they talk a lot of shit to each other, but these guys have known each other since they were teenagers, so I imagine they're close deep behind all that, Chisora and Fury. Fight will probably look a lot like their second fight, where Fury stopped them in the 10th. Fury gets to stay sharp, but I wouldn't be surprised if Fury gets caught with some shots because Chisora's a warrior. He is willing to walk through the fire. Chisora will take one to land one. So, but he is on the decline. He isn't as fast as he used to be. If you go back and watch highlights of their first fight, Chisora had a little bit more hand speed back then, obviously being younger. So it is going to be a sloppier fight. I think Chisora is going to be a little sloppier with his aggression, like he was against Usyk. He was just looking to hit anything. Fury should be able to still take care of business. Actually, Fury fights southpaw against Derek Chisora a lot. If you watch their first two fights, Fury fought a lot of those fights southpaw. So expect him to be southpaw against Chisora quite a bit. But I expect him to handle Chisora, and it joins the pantheon of meaningless trilogies mentioned earlier. Don't have too much more to say. Anything you guys got to say about Fury Chisora before we switch gears and finish the day on Benavidez? David Benavidez, interviewed him earlier in the week. I want to touch on some of the things he said in regards to Caleb Plant and Canelo. But New Year Biz, Chisora throws a ton of punches but gets tired fast. Yeah, he was winded by round 3 against Usyk. He won round 1 against Usyk, but yeah, he was winded. Ray and everything says, thanks, you got it, Ray. Ennis is a monster at 47, and he's not complaining about the weight. Yeah, when I saw him weigh in May on the Charlo Castaño undercard, it surprised me how hydrated and healthy and big he looked on the scale. He didn't need to rehydrate. He didn't go right to the electrolytes and the Pedialyte. He did interviews. He comfortably makes 147, and he's going to be a middleweight one day. So he's a problem. RNS1 says, Bud is going to undisputed at 154. Charlo can't run and hide like Errol. WBO going to mandate the fight. Yeah, I don't think that's reality, my friend. You ain't getting Charlo if you're not getting Spence, period. If Crawford's not going to be able to successfully negotiate a fight with the PBC, that means he's not going to fight anybody from the PBC, not just Spence. That's just the reality of the situation. No comments on Prograis Zepeda. Not so much today. We'll definitely get to that fight soon. When that fight is fight week, we'll definitely do a preview and a breakdown. Off top, I slightly favor Zepeda. I think Zepeda has been a little more active and has been able to fight a little bit better opposition on those top-ranked cards, while Prograis has been in the fringes. So I give a little edge to Zepeda, who I think has come up just short twice, and I think third time might be a charm. I know Prograis is the more dynamic fighter, but I actually think Zepeda, give a slight edge to Zepeda there. Khan Shonery says Chisora is a great warrior, but at this point he only belongs in the ring at a lower tier like Pulev. Yeah, or even like him against Daniel Dubois would be a good fight. He'd be a really great gatekeeper for him against Jared Anderson. I would like him against Jared Anderson, Derek Chisora, as Jared Anderson breaking into the UK boxing crazy market. Get him some UK fans. Gustavo Fontalva, what do you think about Stanionis? Stanionis is he has good explosiveness. He's not slow. He has good explosiveness, but he is, as Mayweather says, straight up and down. And he would be in a different tier. He would be out of his class a little bit with Errol Spence because of Errol's jab. But Stanionis is a good top 10 welterweight. I like his explosiveness. He fights very well on the inside, but he'd get eaten up and dictated to by Spence's jab. Spence would dictate off the jab if he gets his opportunity. I don't see him being particularly competitive with Spence, but Stanionis is a good fighter. Do I agree that Gary Antoine Russell is the dark horse of 140? I don't think he's a dark horse. I don't think because the dark horse is someone you don't expect, and I think everyone suspects Gary Antoine as being probably the most promising undefeated up and coming guy at 140. Tio has a loss, so he's not undefeated at 140. So I don't think he's a dark horse. I think people know. I think people in the business know that Gary Antoine is a threat that's coming up at 140 for sure. So yeah, I expect Fury to do southpaw again. I expect the fight to be a little more sloppy, not as clean combinations thrown by Del Boy as he did in the first fight and in the second fight. Fury looks to stay busy, and I think the most realistic fight for Fury out of the big fights we want to see is Usyk. I think we have a real chance at Usyk happening in 2023. I think that's the fight Usyk wants, and Fury will take it at some point in 2023. So that does it for Fury Chisora. To close, I just wanted to go over David Benavidez. We interviewed him on the channel earlier this week. You guys can go check out the interview. I think we may even have parts of it we haven't dropped yet that are on the way. Can I get a nod from the? Yes. We do have parts of the interview still to drop, but I think like 2/3 of it already dropped with David. So the real news to take away with David apparently is extended his deals with PBC. He has a 3-fight deal with them, and it was thought when I talked to him at the Box Fan Expo back in September, the day of Canelo Golovkin 3, he told me that he was told he'd probably get Plant for the 3rd fight, that he was going to have to fight Jose Uzcategui, then he'd get David Morrell, and then he'd get Caleb Plant. Well, it sounds like now he believes he'll get Plant for that 2nd fight, thankfully, and he could get him in the first half of 2023. That after he beats Uzcategui, it can go right to Caleb Plant, and that's a fight that's kind of overdue. I felt like that fight should have happened when David was the WBC champion and Caleb was the IBF champion. But nonetheless, the pandemic happened, which made things no tickets able to sell, financially made things tougher to happen. David lost his title on the scales in the bubble, and then Caleb had a huge payday that you're not about to risk if you're being smart against Canelo that he eventually secured. And so now all that's behind us, and it looks like the fight can really happen in 2023. And I really hope it does, because their press conferences are going to give us the best press conferences we've had since Tony Harrison and Jermell Charlo's rematch. Those press conferences are going to be tremendous, and it's a great stylistic fight. Caleb got his mojo back against Anthony Durrell. He was punching with confidence and with bad intentions again. He has the right man in his corner in Stephen Edwards. It's a great stylistic fight. The pure boxer against kind of a boxer-puncher who's a pressure come-forward fighter in David. Both fighters have great jabs. It's going to be a great battle of the jab. Both fighters have excellent hand speed. Caleb has better feet than David, but David's a much better puncher than Caleb. So I can't wait to see that fight. We got to get through Uzcategui first, and we get to draw comparisons from that fight. We get to draw comparisons from how Plant did versus Durrell and how Benavidez did Durrell, and now we'll get to draw comparisons between how Benavidez did against Uzcategui versus how Plant did versus Uzcategui. When Plant fought Durrell, he gets the one-punch beautiful knockout that David didn't get, but David stopped Durrell in fewer rounds than it took Plant, but Plant didn't lose rounds like David did. David dropped 1 or 2 rounds to Durrell when they fought. So we'll see how that comparison holds up in December, or January now, it sounds like. So I think that is the fight. I actually think we will finally get Benavidez Plant in the next year. That's good news. I give the early edge to Benavidez. I think he'll have big problems early in that fight, but second half of the fight, he'll find Caleb more and more consistently. And, I could see him getting a stoppage along the ropes or something like that, but I don't put it past Caleb to put his boxing shoes on and put on a clinic too. But I do favor David if that fight happens. Anything you guys want to talk about before we get going here? Wilson says, I think David has the dog in him. Con Shonery, bring on Plant Benavidez. Absolutely. Let's see. Spence and Fundura, that's a good fight. Chisora Anderson would be good. Yep. All right. Professor X says, despite the 3-year age difference between Crawford and Spence, Spence has more wear and tear on his body because of tougher fights and flying through a car window. I don't know. It might even it up. I think it evens it up a little bit. But Spence against Ugas, he got back to in the middle rounds there. Once he really caught fire in around the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, 8, 9, he became vintage Spence again. And he became that wrecking ball again that fought Lamont Peterson, that fought Kell Brook. I saw Spence get back to 100% in the mid stages of that Ugas fight. Even though Ugas buzzed him in the 6th, I saw Spence return back to that full strength. And I think Spence is good to go for a Crawford fight. I'm more worried about Crawford and his age and now his inactivity, which maybe he was a little worried about it too, and that's why he wanted to get this fight in with Avanesian. But heading into this fight, if we were going to get it, I was more concerned about Terrence at 35. To me, his legs aren't quite the same as they used to be, and that's part of why he's getting hit more. He doesn't so much rely on upper body movement. He relies on his length. He knows how to get off where you're not and where he can still touch you because he has freakishly long arms at 5'8". And he also got out of the way of shots with his legs before. But ever since the Jeff Horn fight, his legs are a little more planted. And with age, that's to be expected. And so you talked about Spence's wear and tear. I was a little more concerned about Crawford's age and legs heading into that fight than I was Spence in the car accident. Spence looks back to 100% to me. Crawford's been getting hit more as the years have gone by with right hands. They get hit with the right hand a lot. So, but that's different. Spence is in the right, unorthodox. So we didn't know how that was going to work, but. Southpaw TV, Crawford won his belt against Horn, who won his against Pacquiao. And I know a lot of people felt like that was a robbery. I didn't. Horn got off to a good start in the first round, and I thought Pacquiao, for the most part, never really got in his rhythm outside of the 9th round where he almost knocked Horn out. He had a big 9th round. He hurt Horn, but he didn't really follow it up with a really effective 10, 11, 12 after that. I never thought, watching it live, I never thought Horn got a gift. Southpaw TV, of course, noting Crawford beat Brook and Porter after Spence did. Spence did beat a fresher Kell Brook. There's no doubt about that. And he beat a fresher Sean Porter. He did. But Terrence fought the smartest Sean Porter. Errol and Terrence had to fight a much more intelligent Sean Porter than Keith Thurman had to fight. But Keith Thurman had to fight the most physically strong and fresh Sean Porter. Keith Thurman had to fight the toughest physical version of Sean Porter, who did have some smarts, having learned from the Kell Brook fight. Errol Spence fought the toughest mix of Sean still being in his physical prime and having a lot of veteran intelligence. And then Crawford fought the most intelligent version of Sean Porter, but physically was a little diminished compared to the Spence guy, and definitely physically diminished from the Keith Thurman guy. And I know Sean well, as you all know, so I'm a little bit of an authority to call it on that one. But shout out to my man Sean, who had his birthday party over the weekend. Michael H. says Crawford is the A side. That is objectively not true. Mathematics will prove that's not true. Pay-per-view buys and those kinds of things. Spence is the A side. Southpaw TV, thank you, brother. Appreciate you for the shout out. And to close, Benavidez, sounds like we're not going to have to wait until the second half to see him against Plant. Sounds like we could get that in the first half of 2023. David said it went from being the 3rd fight out of 3 to sounds like it'll be the 2nd fight out of 3 right after Uzcategui. Caleb Plant wants that Canelo rematch. I truly believe if he beats David Benavidez, he'll get his rematch. So I really believe that that's what he's got to do to get what he wants. David, I believe if he beats Caleb, he'll finally it'll be the opportunity that breaks the dam, and the fights will come rushing in. He'll get big fights after that if he could beat Caleb Plant. So that's about all I got for you guys. Thanks for joining me on this Sunday morning. The Niners don't play until 1 o'clock, so it's not like I'm in a rush. You guys, if you want to throw some more things my way, go for it. I got time. The Niners don't start until 1 o'clock. So Pitbull versus Rolly, great fight. That's a fucking great fight, $1 Trillion Dreams. Great fight. That's a great fight. Man, because Pitbull only knows how to fight one way. He comes forward. He's going to walk into some bombs. If his chin can hold up to Rolly, he'll overwhelm Rolly at some point. But I don't know if you could be walking into punches from Rolly Romero. Even the first thing Tank said after the fight, and Tank doesn't like Rolly worth a damn, said he could punch. He's strong. It was the first thing Tank said, is that he's strong, he could punch. So with that said, I favored Rolly. I think styles make fights, and you know, Rolly's made us a lot of money on the channel. So maybe you know, we want to be transparent with you guys. Maybe I'm being a little biased here. You know, Rolly's helped me buy some Jordan 11s over here with all his funny interviews. But no, I'm kidding. Taking that aside, styles make fights, and Pitbull with that pressure, he's gonna walk into bombs. And Tank Davis even said that Rolly can really punch. So I think that'd be a bad. That could potentially spell disaster for Cruz. But if Cruz can take the punch, and he is built so sturdy, and we know fighters from Mexico typically have granite chins, if he can take the punch, he could close the distance and overwhelm Rolly with his shorter, more compact punches. He's much more fundamentally sound than Rolly, and in close phone booth range, he keeps it much tighter than Rolly does. So, but I think as he's closing that distance, he would walk into some bombs, and his legs would do the funny dance. That's my take on it. I love that fight, though, $1 Trillion Dreams. Yeah, we're going to start bringing fans on to talk with me in the future, man. Instead of just... Because I get so distracted with my takes, I wind up missing 20, 25 comments you guys are leaving in the chat. We want to start bringing you guys on and get our Skip and Shannon on. If you feel like you disagree with me and you want to go at it with me, come in the chat. We'll have you on live, and we'll go back and forth. Or if it's more, you just have something to add. It's not about disagreeing. You have something to add. We'll bring you on. We want to make this more interactive in the future. We're just getting this thing off the ground. And really, we thank you guys who keep joining us in the chat, because you're letting us get this off the ground. You're letting us get started. So thanks so much for your help, man. And this is going to grow, man. We're going to have so much fun with this. You guys are going to get some shine. We're going to have you guys in on the chat. Instead of just the super chat and you get your question answered, we want to FaceTime. We want to bring you on and give you some time to speak as well. So this is going to be fun moving forward. Michael H. says Devin's next fight. Good question. It all comes down to if he can make lightweight, right? Because he sucks down and sacrifices the lightweight. He sucks down to the bone. To where Haney sucks down to lightweight, to where his voice gets weakened on fight week. And that's when you know you're really making the ultimate sacrifice to get down. So you don't like that, but he rehydrated really well. He rehydrated in a way he never quite rehydrated in that Kambosos rematch. Look at his body. He looked 155 and strong and healthy. I love the way he rehydrated. And I think at 23 years old, he's at the age where you could get away with sucking down to the bone and rehydrate, put 20 pounds on a muscle, like Miguel Cotto used to do at 140 when he was that age. He's at the age he can get away with it. So I think we're going to get Haney Lomachenko. But there is a chance that Haney moves up to 140 and fights the winner of Prograis versus Zepeda, or fights Arnold Barboza. But I think we will get Lomachenko, and I think Haney will win that fight. He's an ascending 23-year-old who's going to be a welterweight one day. And Lomachenko is a 34-year-old who was a featherweight dealing with injuries. Just putting it like that, you should easily favor the young ascending lightweight Devin Haney. So that's what I got there. Nothing to do with it. All right. Do I think Haney will duck Loma? No. I don't. I think that fight's going to happen, and I pick Haney to win the fight. RNS1 says no one knows Errol Shrew's pay-per-view numbers. Pay-per-view numbers are getting more dicey by the day. before, it was simple. Dan Raphael would report a number for ESPN, and we pretty much knew it was true. I think that was still the case when Errol fought Mikey, and I believe that fight did over 300,000 buys. So I do take that number to the bank. And I do believe Errol's numbers that are reported lately, because they're in the high 200s. They're not some unrealistic number. I believe that Errol was able to do upwards of 280,000 buys against Ugas when I'm in the arena and there's 40,000 people that bought a ticket. That makes sense. I think Errol is a pretty legit draw in today's sport. So yeah, I think we could definitely trust the Mikey Spence numbers. I think that was when Dan was still working at, still had the connect to where the numbers were pretty much official and we could take them as official at that time. Now it's murky. We get 3 or 4 different numbers from 3 or 4 different outlets, and we don't really know if they're official. Maybe I got to hit up my friends at payperview.com. Sometimes they invite us to the dinners at the fights here. I never go to those things. The media, I'm just too anxious to get home after work's done and play video games and hang out with my kid. But maybe I got to hit up the people at ppv.com and get the direct connect to some numbers for you guys. Maybe that's what we got to do moving forward, get you guys some official numbers. Con Shaunery says pay-per-view's dead these days. They don't want to cause any embarrassment by airing the numbers. Let's see. So, who will Wilder fight next? Probably Andy Ruiz, in all likelihood. Small outside shot, Usyk or Joshua, but probably Andy Ruiz, in all likelihood. Mr. Quick says, "Who wants to hear some irony?" Go ahead, Mr. Quick. I'm listening. Floor is yours. What's the irony? And there's a delay on the chat, so I'll be here for a second waiting. What do I think about Eddie Hearn versus Sugar Ellerby Leonard? I think that's a good fight. I think that might even be Ali Frazier-esque, with Ellerby cutting the distance, bobbing and weaving, getting low, getting to the body of Hearn, coming up with left hooks, and Eddie Hearn on the outside trying to box his way. I think that's a good fight. Eddie can. I think. You know what? I'm done talking about it. I'm not. My man says, it's not that pay-per-view's dead, it's just that we don't have the same star power in boxing that we once had. And to tackle why that is would be a whole other live that would take us several hours, and we'd have to be pretty intelligent about what we're saying. That's a whole other live why we don't have the star power we once had. There's so many different things that led us to that point. One thing that's overlooked on why boxing became niche is when ESPN became the worldwide leader in sports, right? And they used to cover boxing quite a bit as a major sport, not as a niche sport. When Mike Tyson was fighting, they covered it like it was a Super Bowl. I even remember Lennox Lewis versus David Tua. They had a live round-by-round scorecard on SportsCenter that night. So, can you believe that? But I think one thing that hurt boxing is when it went to the premium networks like HBO, and ESPN in the 90s transitioned from covering sports to actually broadcasting sports. ESPN began to broadcast Sunday Night Football. They got the NBA. They got the NHL. And they had Friday Night Fights, which was one billionth of their budget. So ESPN began to be business partners with these leagues, not just media. And ESPN began to make billions of dollars with the NFL and the NBA. ESPN didn't have that kind of relationship with professional boxing. They weren't making billions of dollars broadcasting professional boxing like they did other professional sports. So gradually, what happened? They paid less attention to professional boxing. SportsCenter is an hour long. They couldn't even find 2 minutes for it. They're too busy with their billion-dollar partners talking about those professional sports. So the worldwide leader in sports gradually began to not cover boxing as if it didn't exist almost, and that receded boxing in the public eye. So there's so many factors to why boxing doesn't have the star power it once had. We're going to be quick to talk about promoters and the fights, but I think there's even things overlooked like what I just mentioned. So that's a whole other thing. The money is there to fight, to make any fight, really. It's just these fights aren't as big as some may think. If Crawford and Spence really brought tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to the pot, that kind of money tends to incentivize people to work quicker and faster to make a fight happen, But let's see. Someone said Ellie Sekback versus me for a dream fight. If they paid us, I would certainly take it. I'm not averse to fighting for money. I think if they put a lot of money in the ring for me and Ellie, I think I'd do it. And I should definitely be the favorite, being that I have the youth and the size and all. If I can't win, I'm a chump, So I better come out on top of that dream fight where we make money, or else I'm a real chump with my youth and size. But shout out, that man works very hard, and you guys have all watched his videos over the years too. So shout out to him. Gustavo, what about you? Do you practice boxing? Yeah, a little. I mean, a little bit. Just throw that little laser right hand. I got a little. But defense is where my problem is. Can't move my head. All I got is this: catch. That's it. And you guys know that only works with boxing gloves on. So my defense is my offense if I ever have to fight with boxing gloves off. But yeah. Oh, Mr. Quick, Sean, you're right, Mr. Quick. You were the one who had irony ready for us. See what I mean? I get so. Where are we at? Where was Mr. Quick's irony? All that weed smoking gives you short-term memory, and you forget what someone just told you. Errol beats Boots but loses to Crawford, and Boots beats Crawford. That's the iron. Styles make fights. Errol Spence beats Boots Ennis, but he loses to Bud. But Bud and Boots beats Bud. Okay, I actually think that Boots. It's so tough to say. Those are all toss-up fights. They really are. And I'm so tantalized. I'll be honest. I've fallen in love so much eye test wise, and I tend to do that sometimes. I love the eye test. That I'm so tantalized by Boots' talent that I don't know that he doesn't beat both of them, even with all that experience gap. That's just me. But your point, I get your point, Mr. Quick. Styles make fights. Fighter A beats Fighter B. Fighter B beats Fighter C. But Fighter, yeah. What video games do I play? Man, I play a few things. I even got the retro TV with the Sega Dreamcast. This is for retro gaming right here. So when let me see. I got like the Sega Saturn and the old PS2, but this is just the office, my where I do a little retro. I got the Marvel vs. Capcom, but so this is the retro area. But the main game I'm playing right now is 2K, NBA 2K. 2K has been trash since 2K18, but then they got me back with 2K23. The game is good again. Gameplay feels good. Graphics are actually look next gen. So I'm like addicted to my team right now. Like my wife has got to be a little sad at how much I love my team right now. But I'm addicted to my team. I got that season 1 Pink Diamond Scottie Pippen. So and then what else? I mean, I'll play a little Madden. I just because it's a football game, I want there to actually be a great football game. I got NFL Blitz, the arcade cabinet downstairs too. I wish 2K would make a football game. And then the new Halo wasn't that good. I still play it because it's Halo. I'm probably going to go back to playing the old Halos again. And that's mainly what I play. That's mainly Michael Demp said, yeah, this man's growth is crazy. FightHype going nuts. Thank you, brother. Thank you, Michael. I'm happy you recognize it, man. We need Ryan versus Montana Love at 140 and Speedy Ellis versus Boots at 147. My man Molly Mall coming through with the realistic fights. He knows the business landscape. He's saying Ryan versus Montana Love at 140. They're both on the zone, realistic fight. And Rashidi versus Boots at 147. Maybe this is why we need you guys on the live. Because Molly Mall over here is actually the one acting like the realistic boxing journalist, and I'm acting like the fanboy hoping and begging for dream fights that ain't going to happen. You over here hitting me with fights that could actually be made that are good. You know, that like Boots against Rashidi might actually happen, I've heard. And that is a good fight. And it's a realistic fight because it's two guys that no one wants to fight, so they got to fight each other. And it's two guys, you know, still, you know, yeah. And then Montana Love, you know, Eddie Hearn, he didn't sign him for no reason. He wants to get him a real opponent at some point that can make some money. Ryan Garcia fits that bill perfectly. And if Ryan's not going to make the fight with Tank, which we got to see it before we believe it, hopefully it happens, then yeah, fight Montana Love. That would be a very legit fight. So Molly Mall, that's why we got to start having you guys come in live. Good stuff. Yeah, Conshonery, exactly. The classic Frazier beat Ali, Norton beat Ali, Foreman KOs both, then Ali KOs Foreman. Triangle theories have long been debunked. What's the best boxing game ever, and will there ever be a great realistic boxing game, you think? Yeah, I think Undisputed is going to be fun. I think we'll have fun with Undisputed. It'll have its flaws, but we'll have fun when Undisputed drops. I'm going to play that. I want to whoop all your asses online at Undisputed. I actually got to test the game, quiet as kept. I actually did get to test the game. Graphics are phenomenal. Gameplay still needs work and tuning, but we're going to have fun with it. Best boxing game of all time, Fight Night Round 2. I think I got it right here. Hold on. Yeah. Best boxing game of all time for when it was released. Now, for today, Fight Night Champion is a better boxing game. Like, if I'm trying to play a boxing sim, I'm going to play Fight Night Champion. And I hated Champion at first. I thought its physics and its punching were wonky. But once I got the hang of Fight Night Champion, it's the closest boxing sim you're going to get. But I actually loved round 2 and round 4. I was top 100 in the world at round 4 with Tyson and Ali on the cover on 360. But this game, for when it came out, you could, like, you see Roy Jones getting all fat right there. You could move up weight classes in this. The story mode was crazy. The graphics were so good for the time. This got like 10 out of 10 reviews when it came out in 2005. It has my favorite fighter of all time on the cover. So I'd say this is pound for pound the best boxing video game of all time if you're accounting for when it was released. But best boxing sim to play right now, Fight Night Champion. Yeah. And I'll still have my spurts of playing Fight Night Champion like 6 months at a time online competitively, and then I'll take a break from the game. Right now, I'm not really playing it, but I'm down to play some Fight Night live with you guys if we ever want to get, like, maybe before Undisputed drops, we could play some Fight Night Champion in anticipation for it, and you guys could give me your gamer tag, and you could jump on and get your ass whooped, you know, something like that. I'm just kidding, but... yeah. Ancient Guardian, why do you think Floyd only interviews with you and not me? He interviews with the boss, the founder of FightHype, our man BT. Floyd's actually, I would tell you why. I would reiterate what Floyd has said, but he's actually said it multiple times why he loves to talk to FightHype. So I think it's on our main page. Like, it's still one of our featured videos if you want to go on the site and just hear what I mean, to paraphrase, basically, FightHype really took off with Floyd in the late 2010s, at a time when Floyd was like a pariah with the media. Everybody kind of hated him, and so FightHype was the outlet to get his side of the story, because it was going to be one-sided about Floyd Mayweather if you went to ESPN or Max Boxing or other. It was going to be pretty negative, and FightHype kind of just simply allowed Floyd to get his side of the story. Like, to paraphrase, that's basically it. And Floyd said a lot more than just that, but just to sum it up for you, quickly. Let's see. Have I ever played 4D boxing? No, unless that's the VR game. I did play if that's the VR game, yeah, I played it, and I won by knockout. Eater Brisnero, top 500 on Fight Night Round 4 as well. Were you? Yeah. All Fight Night Round 4 was me spamming the weave button, just the Tyson weave over and over and over again. That it was so cheap. Noon Biz, Sean, who do you favor? Haney Loma, Haney. Oh yeah, Ashley Schaefer. Forgive me for the pronunciation. Does anyone at 126 beat Lara? Man, him and Navarrete would be a great fight. But we know Navarrete is not going to fight on the zone. He's going to go up and probably fight Valdez at 130. Lara is a really good puncher at 126. He needs a title fight. I'm so slow. I barely realized he didn't win the IBF when he fought Josh Warrington. And that's a shame. Guy needs a title fight. And shout out to Mauricio Lara. He got the knockout over the weekend on the zone in Mexico. Eddie Hearn went all the way down to Mexico to promote this fight. Did his job. Lara gets the knockout. Fun fighter to watch. Needs a title shot. Needs a shot at the title. The best fight that he could be made won't happen because it's Navarrete. So, unless maybe Hearn would let him go to ESPN. Taking all wagers on Fight Night Champion. Mike Tyson's off limits, though. Yeah, he's cheap. You could beat Tyson with Marciano, though. Marciano might be cheaper than Tyson in that game because you have to hit him with a million bombs to hurt him, and then his fucking right hand is amazing. And then unlike Tyson, he has stamina. I think Marciano might be more broken than Tyson. It's close. Sean, if you had to bet, Rudy Tupapa. Sean, if you had to bet, who do you got Benavidez versus Plant? Benavidez late. Benavidez late in that fight. I think Plant early on whacks him, outboxes him into spots. Looks good. But I think in the second half, when his back touches the ropes more consistently, David's going to eat him up behind the jab, drive him into the ropes, and those combinations, as we all know, are some of the best in boxing. I got David late in a very good fight. Let's see. Oh, yeah, Shakur Stevenson. Yep. What do I see going on with Shakur? And my man already told you, Shakur's on a collision course with Haney Loma if they fight. If they don't fight and Haney moves up, then Shakur Loma happens. So, yep, there you go. That about sums it up. I think that's what Shakur's headed for. He's headed for the Haney-Lomachenko winner. If Haney says, this 135 shit is just, I can't keep sucking down, I'm going to 40, then he'll get Lomachenko instead of Haney. Pretty straightforward path for Shakur right now. They'll get him a good solid fight at 35 to get his feet wet as Haney and Lomachenko get ready to handle their business. Trying to think who makes sense at 35 for who do you guys think makes sense for Stevenson? Let's try to keep it realistic too. Who would Top Rank bring in for Stevenson's debut at 35 as he awaits Haney and Lomachenko to handle their business? I'm trying to think here. I mean, you could always bring Richard Comey again, but come on. I mean, you want to get Comey a win at least, not just throw him right back in there after Loma toyed with him for 12. Give me some names, chat. I don't want to go to the old rankings. All right. Going to the rankings. Lightweight world rankings. Boxing. Shout out to Box.live. Thank you guys for always keeping us with these rankings. All right. Can't Fight Cruz. Kambosos. Jojo Diaz, that would be a good one, but he's on the zone. Kambosos, I doubt he'd turn around and get right back in the ring with him. Cruz is on PBC. Obviously not Tank. Obviously not Ryan. William Zepeda, he fights on PBC. Frank Martin fights on PBC. Michelle Rivera fights on PBC. Limos from Argentina, who's 28-0. Maybe that works. My God, Billy Dibb is still ranked 13th by the WBO? Damn. Shout out to Billy Dibb. Maybe 50 Cent will get him a fight with Devin Haney. Angelo Fierro. That's a good fight. WBO. Nakatani. Nakatia. Oh, he already beat him. Can't do Nakatia. Already beat him. Murataya, but Top Rank has a young undefeated lightweight, Raymond Murataya, that's trained by Robert Garcia, but they won't do that fight. Zarur Abdullayev is still up there. Jermaine Ortiz is fighting Loma. So I'm not sure who Top Rank would come up with, but they're going to get him a fight. I mean, Nakatani is still in the top 10 with the WBC. Maybe Nakatani. We'll see. But he'll get a fight in at lightweight, and Shakur will wind up fighting the winner of Haney and Lomachenko, or he'll just fight Lomachenko if Haney moves up. But, let me see. But I think that's about it, man. Who's the best fighter at 160? Asks Marvin Rollins Jr. I think Jamal Charlo still. Great power jab. I think inactivity and opposition has regressed him a little bit lately, but I think he could still sharpen it up and come out and fight up to the elite level if he's put in with an elite level opponent. I think Charlo right now would beat Golovkin, who's obviously aged. So I think Charlo's the best at 160. I heard Andrade is actually potentially talking to Showtime, so maybe, who knows, maybe Charlo-Andrade could still happen at 160. Janibek is a good fighter at 160. I think Charlo would beat him, but that's a tough competitive fight. So I think Charlo's still the best at 160, but his career has been slipping away from him. You know, the only meaningful fight he's had since J-Rock was Derevianchenko, and he looked really good in that fight. So, but time is ticking for Jamal Charlo. So, New Year Biz. I did peep the Undisputed boxing game. I actually even got to try it out at the Nevada Hall of Fame. Graphics look great. I think we'll have fun with it. So, but that's about it, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on this Sunday morning. That's about it, man. Thank you, guys. We'll be back again live shortly, I don't know, probably this time next week. For sure this time next week. Maybe I'll go live Friday, the day before this Jake Paul, Anderson Silva stuff. But I will definitely be live Sunday after this Jake Paul fight. I'll be in Arizona on fight night. I'll be live doing a round by round for Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva. I'll be live in the building in Arizona. And then I'll be live the next morning with some Sunday morning thoughts and the Z-Cap on Jake Paul, Anderson Silva, and then we'll look ahead to which fights are coming up next after that. Thank you guys for joining, as always, on FightHype. Much love to everybody. And enjoy the Sunday. Go 49ers. Enjoy the games. Have fun, everyone. See ya.